Safe spaces on college campuses, trigger warnings in course syllabi, bias reporting teams that report students and faculty for using terms or promoting ideas that might be considered offensive to some. Many colleges today are removing standardized testing as a requirement for admission. And rampant grade inflation undermines the understanding of whether a student has mastered a subject. I'm Richard Nelson, and you are tuned in to The Commonwealth Matters. A new book suggests that American universities are collapsing. It's called Conformity Colleges, The Destruction of Intellectual Creativity and Dissent in America's Universities, which is the topic of our conversation today. The author is Professor David Barnhizer, Professor Emeritus of Law at Cleveland State University. He's also served as a research fellow at the University of London's Institute of Advanced Legal Studies and visiting professor at the Westminster University School of Law. David, welcome to the Commonwealth Matters program.
Thank you, Richard.
I'm going to start out, by the way, I read your book. I've got it right here, which I think it's just hot off the press. I became aware of it recently. Great read. I've read probably close to 2/3 of it. I'm going to start out with actually several things that I found interesting, maybe startling is a better word, in your book. And you begin in the first chapter by really outlining some of the problems, if we can call them that, at our universities. So, for example, since 2015, an organization called FIRE documented 600 attempts to sanction scholars for protected speech. Most of those sanctions have been successful. 50% of those sanctions have occurred since 2021. By the way, much of that has been directed against conservative speech or ideas that did not fall within mainline progressive, and I use that term in air quotes, orthodoxy. 36 tenured professors were fired for their scholarship or their pedagogy. Now, I'm curious, are these isolated cases, or would you say that this is representative of the climate at most of our colleges and universities today?
Well, when you think of them, they're the cases that were pursued. A lot of cases, the faculty and administrators, for that matter, they can't stand what's going on. Just like in K through 12 systems where you have a lot of retiring teachers who are fed up with the political orthodoxy. They can't stand what's going on, but the movement people are so vicious. I wrote a book published in 2021 called Uncanceling America, and that provided 600 examples across a number of institutions. It's infiltrated the entire culture, and it has intimidated. The people who are doing it have worked their way into some of the top power positions in universities and school boards and the like. And they are intimidating people, so they don't have, FIRE is an amazing group. I mean, I have great respect for them. But that's just the tip of an actual repressive iceberg. I mean, because a lot of people just won't talk. I just got I spent the last week interacting with a student who's a first-year medical student in a school I won't say, for her protection, but she sent me an email and said, can you give me some advice? Because I have found out, I read a review of the book, the Conformity Colleges book, and I thought you might have some ideas about what's going on. So we exchanged over the last 4 or 5 days a series of emails analyzing it. And she said what she found in lectures and classes and the like is this mindless insistence on a one-sided interpretation of very important issues and an absolute lack of tolerance for anything that is different from what the mainstream thesis is. Because what they're dealing with right now, they're talking about the failure of lesser religion in the United States, less people feeling affirmatively religious and having a sort of faith. Well, what has been going on, just like with Karl Marx and Lenin and the like, is they've they said religion is terrible. It's an opiate of the people, et cetera, et cetera. They created their own religion, and they react just with heresy and heretics and excommunication of the people who don't share their views or who dare to say anything that offends it. So what has happened is that people, teachers, intellectuals, the people we trusted to advance these ideas, and students, that they simply play it safe and don't question what's going on. They question it in their mind. They don't question it verbally because of the consequences. And that is what the medical school student and I went through. And she said, thank God, right at the end, about the fifth interaction, she said, besides thank you, she said, she actually has identified some other students who share her views, and you would call them conservative. She did, but it's really the same thing mine are. I'm not a conservative. I am a strong believer in America's ideals and in social justice, and have spent my life as not only a law professor, but a civil rights lawyer and social justice person, activist in the United States and in England and in a lot of Mongolia and Bangladesh and Thailand and Malaysia, Latin America. So I am not taking that crap from anybody. That's what it comes down to.
David, before we got on the program here, you mentioned that you don't like to be labeled. I don't like to be labeled either. But and the reason why this is important to this conversation is because it's often attributed to conservatives who are going to point out wrongs at our universities or in our liberal institutions. But you're not approaching it from a partisan political perspective, are you? You're approaching what's happening at our universities, particularly with cancel culture and if I could use this term, illiberality. The effect that this has had on free thought and the free exchange of ideas at our universities, essentially had a chilling effect. According to a survey in 2017, they found that nearly half of all U.S. college students were reluctant to speak out about politics out of fear of offending their peers. 34%, so a little over 1 out of 3 college students in this country were afraid of offending their professors. And 30% stopped themselves from sharing an idea or opinion because they feared that other students might find their views offensive. So we have what's supposed to be an institution where you have the free exchange of ideas, where there's discussion and dialogue and debate. There's really, it's not happening there like it used to. My question is, how do we begin to restore a climate of the free exchange ideas on our college campuses?
Well, some people get mad at me. First thing to do is do what some states are doing and remove funding for political speech. And by that, I don't mean political speech. What I really mean is the skewed, distorted speech that's being advanced by the DEI people. It's divisive. It's totally divisive. And I have many people I have worked with in my life who are good friends, and it's not the classic, they're friends. I have a lot of people I have worked with for whom I have great respect and liking and appreciation, and they are Black, or they are Hispanic, or Latino, or Asian. And so I don't buy the BS that goes into that. And I have dealt with the cultures on a very basic level as clients, as social justice people that I'm trying to help. I was the attorney for Cleveland's Black on Black Crime Committee. I was the only white person there in that because they needed somebody to help them with the legal stuff, and they trusted me to do it. That's the problem. You have, at this point, you don't have what used to be a lot of people who were striving for that goal, that ideal of knowledge, progress, opportunity, merit, earn your way, get help, with your way. I didn't disagree with many aspects of the affirmative action movement. I think it's been abused. I think it's created a bureaucracy, which then in colleges and universities translated and became the DEI administrations because they're really running many universities. Because academics and even many students are terrified of being labeled or referred to as a racist. And that is the Orwellian club that is being used. And you can't question it. You can't question. You go to experience, their experience. Well, a lot of people have experiences too. A lot of people have bad experiences too. You have to respect it. You have to understand it. You have to have compassion in appropriate instances. But as a generalized, overarching theme, that if you say anything about it, you are a bad person, or question it, it is sick. It is really a kind of intellectual, anti-intellectual sickness, and it's racist. I'm not saying there aren't exceptions, but it's racist the way it is unfolding.
David, there were two bills introduced in the Kentucky legislature this past session that pushed back against DEI at Kentucky colleges and universities. Today, as we record, this is the last day of session, and they're expected to take a vote on one of these bills. Not sure what will happen. But opponents say that if you oppose DEI at colleges and universities, that number one, it could hurt federal funding, but number two, that it chills speech in the college classroom. You're saying something different, that DEI chills speech, if I heard you correctly. So let's talk about that for a moment. How DEI, of course, stands for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think most agree that diversity in itself is not inherently wrong. There's nothing wrong with it. I think we can agree that inclusion, the idea of opening our colleges to anybody who can get in, if they've got the grades and wherewithal to get into college, they should be welcomed. But I think the problem, as I understand it, is the E in the DEI. It's the equity, which essentially is equal outcomes. It's not equal opportunity as you enter, but it's equal outcomes as students are going through or exiting. Is that a similar way that you see it, or are you seeing some other things here too?
Well, I think it's interesting. I believe to a degree in every one of those three. First of all, I'd say diversity, it really is not functioning in a way that it's creating real diversity. It has a view politically for a certain couple identity groups, and they are using the mantra of diversity to privilege themselves. At the same time, they're accusing the rest of the system of functioning according to privilege. So diversity is being abused. I agree with, of course I want diversity. I believe in it. But I want an honest diversity. I want an honest inclusion. And I would apply the same logic and rationale to how inclusion is being implemented in fact, not in terms of what it should stand for and what we think it does stand for, because that's the manipulation that's going on, because they are deep values of social justice. Of course, we agree with them. And then the people who are advancing them in the DEI systems and the genderist systems, they in fact use the emotional power in their narrative to make people agree with them. And if you don't agree with them, you're immoral. And that. Now you go to the idea of equity. There is no system in the world that has ever made the people in that system, everybody gets everything at the same amount. And in the DEI movement, in this movement, they try to do away with the idea of merit. They try to do the words of lack of opportunity. If you read the book, you see all the words, the fundamental words that we use to describe what made sense to give people rights as part of the civil rights movement. And I was involved in the civil rights movement as a lawyer. It made sense. But again, it's not what's really going on. So when they talk about these efforts to shut down DEI in its present characterization, because it will inhibit speech, free speech. Well, get real. It's, the system, the way it's functioning right now, you just said the statistics, they're even a little bit worse by now. But it's already done that. That's why the people are not speaking. That's why they're not talking. That's why the medical student that I communicated with said she asked in a class of hundreds, she asked a question about why are we talking about capitalism and certain kinds of things in a medical school right now as a critique. And the person teaching it just simply said, we'll have to agree to disagree. No discussion, no dialogue, no explanation, just that you better agree with that. And then she's afraid of being typed. And she also told me that secretly, and this is a good thing, secretly, a number of the other teachers, the teachers there also don't like what's going on, but they're afraid to talk about it. So that is where the suppression of free speech and free intellectual interchange is coming from.
Kentucky is at a crossroads. We can choose to give in to the radical left, or we can choose to engage the culture in a God-honoring way.
I started the Commonwealth Policy Center because I believe that Christians have a responsibility to influence government and society to the glory of God. While the Commonwealth Policy Center's made a significant impact, our work isn't finished. If you'd like to join our movement working for timeless values, then head to our website.
To learn more, go to commonwealthpolicycenter.org.
If you're just joining us, you're tuned in to the Commonwealth Matters. I'm Richard Nelson here with David Barnhizer, and we're talking about his book, Conformity Colleges, The Destruction of Intellectual Creativity and Dissent in America's Universities. David, you give several examples of hostility directed towards different ideas, towards others who don't think in conformity, if you will, as your title implies, Conformity Colleges. But you give an example of 17 threats, punishments, and harassment towards university professors for sharing ideas that are outside of the progressive orthodoxy. You gave 7 examples of serious breakdown of civility at our universities, including one at Yale where there was a guest speaker who fantasized, as part of her lecture, fantasized about killing whites. When did that become acceptable at our universities? You don't, if that person was speaking to a business board or speaking at a town hall or another place, they would be roundly condemned. Now, this is a story I became aware of some time ago, but it certainly wasn't picked up by mainstream news outlets. Why is this kind of behavior in speech, hostile and dangerous speech, violent speech, why is that tolerant or tolerated at our universities?
Because, first of all, you talk about Ivy League universities like Yale, uh, the faculty and administration generally is overwhelmingly dominated by the left, and all the data shows it. I mean, I'm not just accusing them or making that up or pulling it out of space. Up into the 90% of political orientations, party registration, and the like are left in that. And in many of them, because the reality is that many academics, and I'm very different from most academics because I've done a whole lot of different things. Uh, but many academics have almost no real human experience. They get there, they do well, they get good grades, they go to the right schools. They get locked into, and most of those are Ivy League. Many of them are Ivy League for the top echelon in terms of the prestige aspect of it. They get that. They get automatic respect. They get streamlined into good jobs in government and in other places, in big law firms and the like. Even there, they don't do much. They get very little human experience. And an example is I continually think about it because I've been in 35 countries and worked with a lot of people that you would call grassroots people in developing nations in that. And when I see people like Hillary Clinton or John Kerry or Blinken or the like, they never talk to the real people in those countries. They never communicate with them. They only interact with the wealthy and powerful elites in those countries who their mission is to hold on to their wealth and hold on to their power and their prestige. So that's what happens in academia. You have people who basically talk to each other, and they don't base their decisions or what they teach on reality. I guess it's their reality, but they don't base it on the overwhelming content of real human and diverse. They talk about diversity, but real human and diverse reality that people go through and suffer through.
David, we are running out of time. I'd like to try to close on a positive note. What are some positive developments that we're seeing happen? Because, again, the universities have turned, and many of them, not all, but many, and it seems to be the trend where they have a cancel culture. They're dumbing down education. They are not tolerant to diversity of opinions or views. We're not educating our young people like we're supposed to. But what are some of the positive developments that you see happening?
Well, one is homeschooling. One is school choice. One is the educational experiments that we just discussed. One is I'm not arguing total removal of DEI, but what I'm saying, there has to be a serious examination of that, and a lot of the funding has to be taken away. And it shouldn't be supposedly just race-based on that. That's one of the mistakes and the flaws, because the dominance is that the people who are hired, it's the best job as a DEI administrator that they're probably ever going to have. And it's the best paying job. And because they're hired to root out discrimination and racism throughout the university, they have to do something. I mean, people don't understand how much money, hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are paying for DEI or affiliated administrations. So that the money, you dry up fairly substantial, intelligently dry it up, focus dry it up, that will help weaken the effort very much. But there are other things. One of the things, you just said it, I'll put it this way. It just popped into my mind. When I was a young law professor, I ran the clinical program at Cleveland State. And a lot of my students were Black. And one of my students and I were coming back from a criminal case that in Cleveland. And he was 6'5" and 245 pounds or so, and played football very well at Grambling University. And he's Black. And we're walking along, and he turns to me and says, "David, I never said this to anybody else, but I always promised myself I would kill a white man." And I said, "That's very interesting, Jim." I mean, I'm not a midget. I'm 6'4" and 220, but he was something else. And I said, "Assuming it's not me, well, let's talk about that." And he said, "Until I worked with you, I had never had a white person treat me like a man, give me my dignity, show that I was a real human person to him. And you did that. And so I just wanted to thank you for what I just haven't told hardly anybody about this, but I just wanted to thank you for doing that. It really changed, I think, who I am."
So, David, what I'm hearing perhaps is, and we'll have to close on this idea, perhaps it's a call to action to each of us to get out of our comfort zone, to get to know others around us, starting in our own neighborhoods, because we don't know who lives across the street from us or a couple houses down from us. but to truly get to know them, introduce ourselves, get off of our iPads and smartphones and talk to them. And maybe bring a neighbor a plate of cookies or something and get to know them as a human being, and not to see them by their skin color or their gender, but as human beings. And I think that would be a good place to start. David, this has been an enjoyable conversation. I appreciate you joining us on the Commonwealth Matters. Again, your book, Conformity Colleges, The Destruction of Intellectual Creativity and Dissent in America's Universities. I think we found this on Amazon. Is that the best place to get it?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on a bunch of sites, but Amazon is probably the easiest.
Very good. Well, we appreciate your time. It's been good having you on the Commonwealth Matters program.
Thank you, Richard.